He would hit me on my knuckles, he would hit me on my knees. Always wonder why Bangalore or Karnataka did not have famous dancers, but dance consciously chose me. Because for me, justice is very important. And I don't like to be penalized. I would work because I had to earn the money to pay my teachers, looking out for real talent. And when there's real talent shining in front of you, they can't ignore it for too long. Artists are hypocritical. Don't want to talk about their fears. Instead, they punch you and they try to go after you, and then they gossip about you. And the artists who are poorer than sports persons, who have no kind of social security, that China actually made its presence felt in the world, that your culture has. India is not about cinema. Even today, I have this ongoing fight because people of Bharat are artistic. I think art is more political. I wanted to do away with nepotism. I wanted to do away with recommendations, bureaucrats and politicians, and a lot of people who I didn't know have got an opportunity through Delhi International Arts Festival to showcase their arts. The less you speak about yourself, the more others will speak about you. And the more you speak about yourself, the less others will speak about you. You're going to be one of the brightest stars of Indian dance, he said. You don't pull the carpet off somebody's feet. You try instead to help people.
सुरों और कदमों से इतिहास जो लिखे वो कलाकार नहीं बल्कि बदलाव की एक शक्ति है। संगीतम नृत्यम च संस्कृति जीवस्य प्राणा, अर्थात संगीत और नृत्य संस्कृति के जीवन और प्राण है। एक मंच जो सिर्फ नृत्य का नहीं बदलाव का है। आज हमारे साथ एक ऐसी कलाकार है जो सिर्फ पाँव से ताल नहीं बनाती बल्कि सोच में एक लय भी पैदा करती है। कभी भरतनाट्यम की मोहक मुद्राएं, कभी ऐतिहासिक गाथाओं की जीवंत झलक, कभी संस्कृति के सवाल और कभी राजनीति के गलियारों में एक ठोस उपस्थिति। 50 दशकों से अधिक, 5,000 से ज्यादा प्रस्तुतियां, 80 देशों की यात्राएं और अनगिनत पुरस्कार, जिनमें पद्मश्री और संगीत नाटक अकादमी अवार्ड भी शामिल है। आज हमारे साथ हैं एक नृत्याचार्य, सांस्कृतिक दूत, क्यूरेटर, लेखक और बदलाव की एक मिसाल, पद्मश्री प्रतिभा प्रहलाद जी। मैं आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है तत्वा की भरतनाट्यम की पॉडकास्ट सीरीज में। थैंक यू सो मच मैम हमारा इनविटेशन स्वीकार करने के लिए। बात करते हैं आपके इनिशियल डेज से। आप आती हैं इंडस्ट्री में बाहर की तौर पे, नॉन घरानादार पर्सन यू वाज देयर। सो व्हाट वर योर इनिशियल स्ट्रगल डेज?
So I started learning dance when I was 4 years old, like I've often said, because there used to be a dance teacher near my house who used to teach dance. And my parents were working parents, and I used to be alone in the house with my brother in the afternoons, when with a maid. So I started running to her house, and I used to sit, and I used to like seep in the ambience of the dance class. बहुत छोटी थी मैं, and sub log, they used to love me. So basically they would sometimes make parrots out of palm leaves and all that,
Yes.
and give it to me. And I would be watching the dance class, and all these senior women, girls, senior girls at that time, teenage girls, they used to be very loving and kind to me. The dance teacher was very kind. Her name was Sunanda Devi, and she was young and beautiful. She must have been in her 20s at that time. um, and her guru Lokaya used to come to teach also. So I started learning like it was playing. For me, that's why I always associate dance with joy, because my initial days of learning were joyful. It was full of fun, play, laughter, and joy. Thereafter, Sunanda Devi left the place and she went away somewhere, and I was. My mother tells me that I was very sad that I could not go and like experience the dance environment. So she fixed a teacher who could come to my house and teach me. And this teacher would come on Thursday evenings and Sunday mornings, 2 days a week. Um, Initially, I liked it, but later on, he was a very strict person, and he was very kind of, he would hit me on my knuckles, he would hit me on my knees. So I used to dread Thursday evenings and Sunday mornings. I don't know how I continued, because many times I thought of, like, I don't want this teacher. I don't want to dance. I know why he's coming. I hope he's sick. I hope he doesn't come today, kind of a thing. But anyway, I continued, and I did my Ranga Pravesha when I was about 13 years old, and his teachers, Professor U.S. Krishna Rao and Chandrabhaga Devi. Um, Incidentally, today is Chandrabhaga Devi's birthday, you know. So they saw me perform my Ranga Pravesha, my Arangetram. And they called my mother and told her that, your daughter is very talented, so please send her to us. But we lived in South Bangalore. And my mother, like I said, was a professor of English, and she was busy with her own career. My father was an engineer, and he also taught evening college at an engineering institute.
Yes.
So he was also extremely busy. There was no time. So my mother told Krishna Rao sir that when she goes to college, maybe she can come on her own, and we'll send her. Right now she's in school. So he said okay. So 1 year later, I joined Mount Carmel College, because those years, pre-university used to be in college. We didn't have class 11 and 12, like you have now
Mm.
in school. So I joined Mount Carmel College, and I used to go by the college bus to college. From the college, Master's house, Krishna Rao's house, was a walking distance. So I started going, like, for class. And I had to come back by myself, or I had to bunk class and go to be able to catch the college bus to come back, things like that. And it went on for many, many years. By the time I was about 18, I wanted to be a professional dancer. And I used to always wonder why Bangalore or Karnataka did not have famous dancers, you know. So all the famous Bharatanatyam dancers were in Madras. We used to call it Madras those days,
Mm.
Chennai today, and or Delhi. And of course, whenever the government looked at promoting anybody or supporting, any dancer for a tour, for a festival, for a performance, they always, got a Bharatanatyam dancer from Madras, Kathakali dancer from Kerala, Kathak dancer from the north, Odissi dancer from either north or, Orissa, and a Yakshagana dancer from Karnataka. Never looked towards Karnataka for classical dance, Bharatanatyam, or, any other classical dance. So uh, I somehow was determined. I said, why? And I started looking at life stories of dancers, and what is it that, I lacked, mm, which, prevented me from becoming a top quality professional. So I started going to Chennai to learn Abhinaya from Srimati Kalanidhi Narayanan. She was Padma Bhushan at that time, famous, and I had seen her demonstrate, an Abhinaya in a festival in Bangalore. So I asked a dance critic called Mr. BVK Shastri whether he would introduce me to her. He said yes. So I went to her. I told her. She said, "How will you come from Bangalore to Madras? So you're going. Also, you're in college. You have your college." I said, "No, I'll come." So every Friday night, I would take a train, go to Madras, and I would stay at her place. I would learn like 12 hours a day. Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Natuvangam, theory, Abhinaya. It was like the weekend was full, and I would take a train again, night train, from on Sunday night back to Bangalore, which came in early at around 5:36, and I would attend college at 10 o'clock in the morning. So because my parents had made it very, very clear to me that for them my academic qualifications were very important, and they had said, if you finish your master's degree, then you can choose to be a, whatever you want to be. Whether you want to be a Bharatanatyam dancer, you want to be an artist, you want to be whatever you want to be. But they said, no, you have to have a master's degree, because you have to have a fallback option, because nobody ever, it's a very tenuous space, so you don't really know whether you're really going to make it or not. And like you said, nobody in my family was an artist, nobody, and they did not even have influence in the artistic field. Because see, influence plays a very, very important role in these kinds of situations. If you know a lot of people in the artistic, kind of field, if you know, government, organizers, if you know all the sabha organizers, you have been a patron, your parents have been a patron, or your grandparents have been a patron, or if somebody in your family is a dance teacher, has been a dance teacher, or any artist for that matter, the journey is easier because
Yes.
you already know the field.
Mm.
And in my house nobody knew the field because, like I said, my parents, I told you about their
Mm.
profile, and my cousins and all were, doctors, engineers, mbas. So nobody knew anything in the artistic field, though they loved art, but they never knew how this field worked. So I don't, yeah, so I don't know how or why. I just feel that sometimes, destiny plays a very, very important role. When I look back at my life, I think, many a time, you know, I have been destined to be there. And I think dance chose me. I must have chosen dance subconsciously, consciously as a young child, but dance consciously chose me. And then I started learning from Muthuswami Pillai in Madras. I started learning from Dr. Vemparichan Satyam Kuchipudi in Madras, and I was learning Natuvangam from Srimati Kamala Devi, and and of course Abhinaya class we used to have early morning and late night because I used to stay in Kalanadi auntie's house, so she would take class early morning or late night for me, and so life was full. Life was, like, I didn't have a minute to breathe. I went on that journey. I finished my graduation. Then I did, join postgraduate studies in mass communications in Bangalore University. The same routine continued for 1 year, and then somehow this professor decided to fail all of us. He was not a professor; he was just a teacher, of reporting in mass communication. He just decided that in a class of 22, he hated 14 of us for some reason. So all of us he failed. So when he failed all of us, I went to court. And meaning all of us went to court, but I was leading the thing. I know others got jobs, some got married, some left, but I continue to, strive for justice, because for me, justice is very important, and I don't like to be unjustly, you know, penalized. I mean, that's the word for anything. I don't like being penalized when it's not my fault. So we fought in court for almost 1.5 years. At that time, I would go to Madras 15 days a month because I had nothing to do. So I would work for 15 days in Doordarshan, which had just come into Bangalore, um, the national television. So I would work there as a producer, as a production assistant, sometimes behind the camera, sometimes sitting on the console, you know, things like that. So I learned all the, tools of the trade of how to, record, present, mass communication, script writing, all those kinds of things. Um, and I would work for 15 days and I would go to Madras for 15 days. I would work because I had to earn the money to pay my teachers. My parents had said, no, 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 this is, like not going to, we're not going to do this. It was really expensive. So I would earn and I would go and I would spend 15 days in Madras. It became my second home. And well, that is how I started my journey. And people watched me, people saw me, people liked me, and so people gave me opportunities. So when a lot of people tell me today that, oh, you have to have power, influence, money to make a name for yourself, I say no, you have to have talent, you have to have grit, you have to have determination, and you have to have focus. You have to have focus. And be prepared to do hard work. You will make it because somebody out there is looking out for real talent. And when there's real talent shining in front of you, they can't ignore it for too long.
Right now, you talked about that voice of the class, justice. You have been part of the many of the committees created by the government, formed by the government, and you have raised the voice for the artists many times. So I want to discuss the one or two topics or the main issues you have catered and you have overcome, and you have facilitated for the in front of committee, you have put these issues. So what those were?
So, like I told you, my journey when I started, I didn't have many supporters, right? So I had to literally prove my way through, stage by stage, step by step, with my own teachers and then, others. So I always had this at the back of my mind that if I can, I should support artists who are brilliant, who've not found a forum, and who are looking for a forum. Um, and so early in my career, when I was barely 26, 24, I think, I started the Prasiddha Foundation, and started teaching dance like everybody does. So I was teaching when I was, it's almost 40 years ago. I started teaching, and all those children are now in their 50s, some of them, in 40s, 50s, and they have their own schools, their students have their own schools. So many of them are on their own journey in the arts. But that's not what I want to tell you. Prasiddha Foundation, I had the opportunity of meeting some sponsors, and they, those days there was something called VSK Festival. It was called Spirit of Freedom Festival. And it was very, very popular in Andhra Pradesh, and it used to be televised. All the freedom, Spirit of Freedom concerts used to be televised. And that person contacted me to perform for the VSK festival. And he liked my performance a lot when I performed. So he asked me whether I would like to organize an edition of that festival in Bangalore, whether I can. See, I don't back out of challenges. It was a huge challenge because I had no experience in organizing at all. I had no experience in, how to do it. But for me, everything, is whatever comes in front of me. I never back out. I'm just telling you, if someone gives me a role tomorrow and says, "Will you do it?" I'll say, "Okay, I'll work hard towards it, but I'll do it." I'll not say no. I can't. I'm not. I don't know how to. I won't say that. So anyway, so I booked the auditorium, I booked the artists, and the funding was coming from the Spirit of Freedom. So we had Zakir Hussain, Bhimsen Joshi, Pandit Jasraj. Bhimsen Joshi was alive at that time, so he was there. Then Zakir, and then we invited Sonal Mansingh ji to perform, and I was performing one day, and then there was another. So 3-day festival.
In which year we are talking this
We're
one?
talking of 1990,
90.
something, yeah. So that was the first time that I organized this huge festival. Bangalore had never seen a festival like that. So there were huge queues outside the venue, Chaudhary Memorial Hall. We had to put up a screen outside. It was novel those days to put up a screen outside. The venue people were getting really angsty because they said, "Oh, how can you have so many people in jam packed all the 3 days?" So that was my first experience. Soon after, in 91, I started Sharad Vaibhava, a festival, again, 3-day festival, music and dance, like a music dance combined, because somehow I felt that musicians never attend dance performances and dancers never attend pure classical performances. We have our own musicians, but we don't attend pure classical performances. All of us know that the arts are interrelated, right? And there was a time in our country where musicians, dancers, painters, literatures, writers, poets, they all gathered together, and they spoke to each other, they debated, they discussed, and that's how beautiful art was produced. Whatever art you want to talk about. But in the 90s, late 90s, early 20s, um, it got bifurcated for some reason. Maybe independence movement, post-independence movement. Musicians became musicians, dancers became dancers, painters became painters, and it became a profession. So nobody had time, probably, you know. So they kind of drifted apart. So I wanted musicians to watch dancers, dancers to hear musicians, and so I said we should, have a festival where everyone's there. During the day, in the morning, we would have a colloquium. And that was the start of it because there was no other conference in dance before what I started in Bangalore. So it used to be called Sharad Vaibhava. We used to have a colloquium in the morning. So the artists who performed in the evening would talk about the art. Sometimes they would talk about their journey. Sometimes they would talk about the choreography. Sometimes they would talk about what inspires them. You know, so all these kinds of talk shows, panel discussions, seminars, um, you know, PPT presentation, which is what was called later, video presentations. I started then under the head of colloquium. We had seniors, we had gurus, we had famous artists, we had youngsters, all gathered in one space, and all questions, all doubts, and they could answer, they could question, because I wanted a space which was free, where nobody was nervous.
Hmm.
Most most often what happens is that artists are hypocritical, very very hypocritical. The well-known artists don't want to talk about their fears and their insecurities. They want to be this divas, dance divas, um, and even the musicians, like their gurus, their thing, their worship. People are falling at their feet, so they have a sense of self which is exaggerated. You know, so I wanted to punch that. I said, "Who is the real you? What are you? Who is the real you?"
How you convince them? That was a difficult task.
So when you put them on a stage and you start talking to them, no, they don't really don't have a choice, because there's an audience out there, and they either they come out, just like you're doing to me right now. I mean, we don't have a live audience, but we used to have a live audience, so you really don't have a choice. And artists are actually lovely people. They're very humane. They are they have their insecurities, and that is why they don't want to come out, because it's a cruel world, and if someone knows that you're vulnerable, they'll go after you. They don't try to support you, they don't try to uplift you, they don't try to help you overcome your anxiety. Instead, they punch you, and they try to go after you, and then they gossip about you, and they talk about your reputation and all these rubbishy things, which actually make no meaning. So I think that's why, because artists are public figures, and they're vulnerable when they go on stage. So I guess that is why they're kind of reticent about talking about themselves. And I realized that in the initial years of my career, when we used to have these colloquiums.
Yes. Right now, if we talk about the Delhi International Art Festival, how that idea came in your mind, because and what were your initial vision, that how big or how I will go this journey?
So, like I said, I started Sharad Vaibhava, and then I started Eka Aneka Festival, and they became big brands, very big brands in Bangalore, annual festivals. In 1995, I started the Jindal Vijayanagar Festival, Hampi Tourism Festival, which again became hugely successful. Um, because Hampi is a beautiful place. It was neglected, and the Jindal people were starting the Vijayanagar steel plant over there. So I convinced them that the only way a North Indian company could get accepted in a remote South Indian district was to sponsor cultural festival and to become a part of it. Otherwise, they would take years and years and years to build that bond with the local people. They understood that. They kind of were willing to try out. And there was this person called Mr. Prithviraj Jindal. He's, I think, Sajjan Jindal's older brother. So he, instantly said he would sponsor the festival, and it was a huge festival. After that, I also lobbied with the Ministry of Railways to get concession for all the artists traveling for performances. And I'm talking of 1995, 96. Okay. If you see the government letter, it says Prasiddha Foundation's initiative, which asks for, I said to the railway minister at that time that sports persons get concessions when they travel. Even those sports persons who are not medalists or something, who haven't won the gold or silver medal. So why shouldn't artists who are poorer than sports persons, who have no kind of social security measures, why should they not get concession when they travel by train? So the ministry, agreed. The ministry kind of deliberated, and all artists traveling for performances had to have a stamp or a letter of invitation stamped by the local department of culture or somebody locally who could certify that they were really artists, that there was no one misusing the scheme. So I once they got that, they would get 50% concession in first class and 75% concession in second class train. Okay, and that is, I think, a contribution I'm proud of. um, when I go to remote areas, even today, in Karnataka, Kerala, um, South Tamil Nadu, a lot of people come up to me, seniors, theatre people mostly, they're large groups. They come up to me and say, "Aapne bahut acha kiya tha." They say in their own local language, of course, that we're all benefited for 30 years. We've had this concession, so the meager money we got, we didn't spend on travel and all that. At least the travel concession was available to us. Nowadays, of course, nobody wants to go by train, they want to fly. But I'm just telling you that those were the days when the money was like very minimal, and you had to save money to be able to make a living of art. Being an artist was hard. So when I started that, when I came to Delhi, in Delhi, I live in a very privileged part of Delhi, and I just it's the Mandi House area. There's Kamani Auditorium, Triveni Auditorium, Sri Ram Center, Sri Ram Bharatiya Kala Kendra's classes, National School of Drama, Kathak Kendra, Doordarshan, everything. And then a little further up towards this one is the police headquarters was ICCR, Azad Bhavan, and a little up here, Fiki Auditorium also was functional then, Sapru House, everything was functional. And Indira Gandhi Center used to be in Mansingh Road. And I used to get invitations for performances. Sangeet Nat Academy, Sahitya Academy, Lalit Kala Academy, opposite my house, Rabindra Bhavan. So everything was there. And I just realized that each one was having their own festival, right? And many artists were repeated in these festivals. But being from South, I knew how, aspirational it is for artists to be performing in Delhi, the capital city. We keep waiting for an opportunity. We keep waiting for an invitation. In Union South, you say, "Oh, will the Academy call me? Sangeet Nat Academy call me for a performance? Will Indira Gandhi Center call me for a performance? Oh, will ICCR call me for a performance?" Because I need to be seen. I need to present my art in front of people who matter, who can define my career. Basically, it's about how do you take your career forward, right? And everybody looks to Delhi because Delhi being the capital city, you need those people in power to see you, to appreciate you, to acknowledge you, and to promote you, obviously. So I said, why are these people calling the same artists again and again and again and again within the Mandi House Mile? Academy also is having the same artists, Kamani same artists, for the Sri Ram festival same artists, Fiki same artists, Indira Gandhi Center same artists, and the same artists. Within a month, 2 months, same artists. I said, but India is such a vast country, and our talent pool is so vast and wide, and there's so many extraordinary musicians, extraordinary dancers, old, young, medium, whatever. And they're all waiting to perform in Delhi. So I approached each one of them and I said, I want to have a Brand India festival called Delhi International Arts Festival. It has to be like the Edinburgh Festival, or it has to be like Tokyo International, Adelaide International, Brisbane International, or the Shanghai International Festival, which becomes the signature festival of our country, which offers all forms of art. to all kinds of artists, both national and international. So initially, ICCR was headed at that time by Pawan Verma. So he said, okay, we will collaborate. Went to ITDC, headed by another well-known bureaucrat, who instantly said, okay, we'll do it. Went to Ministry of Culture, Secretary Culture said, okay. Then went to Sangeet Nat Academy. Mr. Ravinder Singh, Ravindra Mishra, so chairperson. He was a member of parliament. Very, 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 very astute gentleman. Said, yeah, I collaborate. And Indira Gandhi Center, I think, was headed by Chinmay Mehta. So he too said yes. So I had my collaborators. And now I needed to knit the festival together. So I gave different verticals to different organizations. Classical music and dance to Sangeet Nat Academy, literature festival to Sahitya Academy, painting exhibition to Lalit Kala Academy. Then I went to Indira Gandhi Center and told them, let's have a morning raga festival over here because of the lawns, and Sufi Qawwali in the evenings. So, that got covered, genre. Then went to NDMC. So started the jazz festival in Nehru Park, different genre. Went to ICCR and asked for collaboration for international festivals. I said, so many international festivals, international, foreign governments approach you and you have a tie-up with them, but you never curate it artistically. You just take whoever they send. Okay? We should, demand the best of the best. Why should we accept any artistic group that they send? Let me curate it for you. It's the same thing, a bilateral understanding you have with the country, but you need an expert to curate it because there's no expertise in ICCR to curate a artistic festival. They said yes. So we started having collaborative meetings to decide which art forms should come, which artistic groups should come from the countries. And then the Delhi International Arts Festival, we got Airtel as the principal sponsor. And it just kind of, one fine day, all of Delhi was red with the lady, the logo of the Delhi Arts Festival, a multi-faceted, Indian woman with a large heart is what I call a contemporary Indian woman. A multitasking contemporary Indian woman with a large heart is what, the logo kind of meant for me. And it was there all over Delhi and everybody noticed it and everybody was performing. Since there were almost about 800 artists performing, suddenly it was the biggest festival India had ever seen and professionally curated.
Yes. Right now, you talked about the curation. So we talked 2010 Commonwealth Games. So you was also part of that committee who was the cultural opening and ending ceremony. So what was your role and how you did any curation or in that also?
So basically, I was appointed as the convener of the culture committee of the Commonwealth Games. And just before Delhi, Beijing had the Commonwealth Games. Not Commonwealth, Olympics.
Olympics 2008.
Olympics,
8.
yeah, 2000. 2 years before, yeah,
Yeah,
2008
it was.
Yeah.
Beijing Olympics.
And that was the first time that China came out into the world. And everybody saw the opening and the closing. The games, of course, medalists, of course, but the opening and the closing, the precision, the vastness, the aesthetics, the beauty, the alignment of the artists, and the pure sheer artistry of the opening ceremony. It kind of dazzled everybody all over the world. I don't know if you remember that.
I have seen that on television itself. It was great.
It was the first time, according to me, that China actually made its presence felt in the world. That's the power, that your culture has. That is what soft power is. You have to understand it. What is soft power? Not some dancers going and dancing, some musicians going and singing, and an audience of 100, 200, fine. But just imagine the spectacle of showing your country's culture with that precision, that quality, that aesthetic quality, that beauty, the artistry. And then suddenly everyone's saying, China. So it was not the economic rise of China that made China, respected. It was the cultural rise of China that made it respected, and China understood it.
Same thing people was also expecting from the Commonwealth itself,
Correct.
2010.
Correct. So I was sent to China to watch that. I was there, for the Beijing Olympics. Um, and I came back and I made a proposal. I said, India has such, rich diversity in our art forms. And most of the people in the committee were talking about cinema stars, blah, 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 blah. So you can have one cinema star as your brand ambassador, two, maybe three, whatever. It's a brand ambassador kind of a thing. But India is not about cinema. Even today, I have this ongoing fight, with many ministries, government organizations. When they say Bollywood, Bollywood, I said Bollywood is not soft power. Yes, I mean, in which case then Hollywood also becomes America's soft power. Not exactly, right? America says, "Theek hai." I mean, Hollywood is a commercial entity. They're making their money. They're actors. They're doing whatever they have to do, and they're internationally well known. Just like our Bollywood stars, do they do anything for the country for free? Will they do anything, at a subsidized cost? Even their one appearance they charge for, right? So they're commercial people who are doing something for commerce, not for the country. And if you're so obsessed about Bollywood, you will forget the intangible heritage of our country. Because our country, Bharat, is perhaps one of the few countries in the world, or maybe the only one, that has this diversity and depth in art forms. And the variety, the richness, the color, the music, the dance. I mean, there's sheer art everywhere. Because people of Bharat are artistic. They are inherently artistic, not consciously maybe, but inherently artistic. You put rangoli in front of your house, you put those toruna tie up on festivals, you decorate your mandir, you wear lovely saris, jewelry, you know, you you are artistic the way you present yourself. Everybody used to sing in our family. My grandmother used to sing, I remember. She may not have been a professional musician, but she used to sing. My aunt was a professional singer, meaning she didn't go on stage for money, but she was a beautifully trained classical vocalist. My other aunt was a veena player, South Indian veena player. Not professional, like I said, but they were all academics. But they all had learned because that's part of our culture. That's part of who we are. Everybody in the family learns something, right? And you're artistic, your expression is artistic. So I said, with this kind of diversity, we should have some grand opening and a grand kind of a closing. I attended many, 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 many um, meetings and came up with the script. And then, uh, sh- they accepted that five dance forms with several dancers should form part of the opening ceremony. So, irrespective of the other part of the opening ceremony, which had actors and all that kind of stuff, it was the dance forms and the grandeur and the beauty and the color and the music that you know caught the imagination of the world, and I'm really happy it happened.
You talked about a lot of things that you have taken a lot of initiatives. Sometime maybe you have feel some discrimination, like politics in the industry, you can say, or you can say by government sector, or maybe the in between the artists. Have you feel any discrimination initial level itself?
Oh God, I mean, this is a question that is on everyone's mind. I think art is more political than politics itself, than real politics itself. Artists are more political, manipulative, and self serving than real politicians themselves. And this is something I can say out of experience.
And you have also faced some nepotism issues also in the initials.
Absolutely. Art is all about nepotism, all about subjectivity, all about who you like, who you don't like. It's very, very, very discriminatory. And that is why I wanted to have a festival like Delhi International Arts Festival, where people could apply. People need not talk to me or suck up to me or beg me for a opportunity. So you're good enough, you apply, you get your videos, send some recommendations. We will invite you and we'll present you. If you're a senior artist, you get a senior slot. If you're a mid-level artist, you get a mid-level slot. If you're a young artist, budding artist, then you get to dance in the Young Artist Festival. So that is why I started, because I wanted to do away with nepotism. I wanted to do away with recommendations of bureaucrats and politicians and semi-government people who go on writing letters of recommendation for artists. More importantly, being an artist myself, I have noticed that people don't, now maybe they do, but people did not treat artists with respect. If you're a very, very famous artist, of course, then everyone respected you and treated you. But if you were a mid-level artist, young artist, fairly, semi-known, unknown, there was no respect in the field. When you went to ask for performances, it was like you're asking. You're always asking. You're asking director of culture for performance. You're asking secretary of culture for performance. You're asking secretary Sangeet Nat Academy for a performance. You're all the time asking, and I hate that. I hate it. Not just for myself. I hate it for all artists. I said, you're a good artist. You spent a good 20 years, practicing and perfecting your art form. You're valid. You're good. You're fabulous. You're confident. Why do you have to beg? Just to get your foot in the door. So once you do it, in other careers, there's a steady rise. In art, there isn't. Because many others gang up when you're rising in your field to put you down. And they start talking about your reputation. They start saying, irrelevant things like, oh, she's arrogant, so don't give her a performance. And I would say, what does my arrogance have to do with my dance? Okay? When you give me a performance, you're evaluating me on whether I'm a good dancer or not. Whether I'm a good performer or not on whether I'm arrogant or not. Those are two separate things. But no. Oh, so what do they mean by arrogance? They mean that you're not servile, that you're not condescending, that you're not begging.
You're not a yes man to them.
Yeah, you're not a yes person, and you're not saying, please, yeah. You're not saying that. You're saying, look, this is my bio profile, and I would like you to please consider me. It's polite, it's professional, but it is not servile, right?
Yes.
And they think that is arrogant because a lot of artists don't do it. A lot of artists are very, very sweet and good and whatever you want to call it. And like I keep saying, oh my God, it's like eating 1,000 jamuns. I want to die. I mean, I can't, I can't take this anymore. It's too sweet for me. So I always tell people that I'd rather be called arrogant than easy. Okay. And, it's okay. I mean, treat me like an equal. You may be a bureaucrat, but you're not superior in intellect or ability. I chose to be a dancer. It doesn't mean that I am, less than you in intellect or ability. I can talk much more than what you have. I have a more, holistic understanding of issues. And I come from from an educated academic background. So treat me like an equal. Don't treat me like some subservient person who's asking for an opportunity. So many a time I think about it and I think maybe I created all these platforms because I didn't want to ask others. And I wanted to show them that I was capable of creating my own platforms, if need be, that I'm not going to be in that askance position of telling people what they should give me. Please do this for me, please do that for me. Oh, I hate it. Because you can be professional, polite, well mannered, respectful, but you should not be servile
Yes.
because you spent so many years of your life, perfecting your art and whatever you God has given you.
Right now, we talked about the semi-known people or unknown people. If they send to profile to you, what 2 3 things they should take care of? That profile should be like that only. People doesn't know these kind of things.
They do know. They're more smarter than what you and I think. I didn't know, but they're very, very smart. They have beautiful videos they send, they have a beautiful profile they send. But these days, after social media came into existence, everyone can do it. So a lot of them are social media dancers who get themselves shot in beautiful places and, send. I kind of cross check, I cross reference. um, I don't do the curation all the time myself, but for the main venues I do. And young artists, they send their teachers' names, their some kind of a reference will be there. So call up the person and say, how is this person as a dancer worthy? Will become a professional or is a dilettante? Who just wants a platform. So what kind? So they tell me a feedback, and then we kind of, we used to invite them. And a lot of people who I didn't know at all, have got an opportunity through Delhi International Arts Festival to showcase their arts. Many people have written to me, congratulate me, thanking me, congratulating me for creating this platform and thanking me for a wonderful audience, thanking me for a professional setup, thanking me for, all the courtesies they received. But I never get to see them. So I'm not on the stage, at every performance, like with every artist saying, I did it, I'm the curator. See, that is what it is. The less you speak about yourself, the more others will speak about you. And the more you speak about yourself, the less others will speak about you.
Yes. Right now, we talked about unknown to known. You were also one time unknown. Suppose you are at 20 22 age. What you like to advise that 22-year girl?
So basically, I was known at 18
Hmm.
in Karnataka. Because Bangalore dancer, I became well known by 16, 18. Um, and then, yeah, so in Karnataka, I was known. I was having a lot of performances. Um, but at 22, I was still unsure of myself. I was very, very sure I want to be a dancer. Like I told you, I was still in college. I was doing my master's degree and all those things were happening in my life. I was very sure I wanted to be a professional dancer, but I wasn't sure how I was going to chart my course. So I used to practice, like I said, 15 days a month, and then give my best. But and then send letters out to people saying that I'm so and so and I would want to perform. Dasara festival, Pattatkal festival, Somnath festival, those were the festivals. And then somebody saw me. Somebody from Delhi saw me, Sangeet Nat Academy. His name was Swaminathan, sir, senior person who I didn't know. And I believe the artistic fraternity at that time called him Sam Uncle. He somehow happened to be in Bangalore and I performed. And he just saw me. And then he came to me backstage and he said, "You're going to be one of the brightest stars of Indian dance," he said to me. I was like, like flabbergasted. I said, "But I don't know anybody." He says, "I will." And he wrote to Academy, Sangeet Nat Academy, to feature me in the Young Dancers Festival, which they had in Delhi. And that's how I started coming to Delhi. My first performance was in the Young Dancers Festival, and then Academy had another performance somewhere, and and then like one led to another, and I was getting noticed step by step. Of course, a lot of people tried to um, you know throw junk at me and say that I was not good enough, that I was whatever. I mean, they use words that are hurtful to prevent you from becoming who you are. But I always told them, I said, my one performance is equal to your 10. So go ahead, dance in 10 performances. I only have to do one. And, that gets remembered, noticed. And that's how I'm going to make my career.
And that is a great message for all the young girls and the boys they are doing. They also face the same things.
Yes.
Right now, you say that you are strict. People say that sometimes you're arrogant. What common myths people really thinks about your behavior, or you can say behavioral traits?
You told me that people said, I told you I was strict. I did not.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, like I said earlier, I'd rather be a good person than be a nice person. Okay, because goodness comes from the heart. Goodness is integral to your character, to who you are. And if you're a genuinely good person, then you don't harm anybody else. You don't manipulate anyone, either for favor or out of fear. You don't manipulate anybody. And you don't undercut anybody. You don't pull the carpet off somebody's feet. You try instead to help people genuinely if they're in need, and those who genuinely need advice, you give it to them and tell them how to negotiate this maze of life. Niceness is a different quality. You can be extremely nice to me and in front of my face, and be extremely wicked behind my back, right? You
That's
can
true.
say something really nice and sweet when I'm standing in front of you, and the moment I turn my back, you can say, oh, what a horrible person she is, and what does she think of herself, and things like that. So I don't really give much value to niceness. I give value to goodness and genuinity. And I also give value to, see, like I said, I mean, when I say I'm not a nice person, it doesn't mean I'm rude. I'm not rude, but I have red lines. You can't cross those red lines. Anybody, for that matter, nobody crosses those red lines with me, because those are the red lines I've drawn for myself, for my protection, for my own life and my rules. I have always led my life by my rules. I negotiate my profession also by my rules. So no one can't cross those red lines and get over familiar with me. That I will not allow. But yes, I think I'm a good person, and I think I have tons and tons of friends. So I must be a nice person also. I mean, naturally nice, I'm saying.
Yes, you are a very nice person. That's after meeting you, I certify these things
Thank
normally.
you. Thank you.
You said right now that you are a good human being and you are a very good mother also. If you talk about your part of a mother, suppose there is sometimes normally how you manage that very good. You are at peak of your career. You are managing your career itself. You are managing your professional life or personal life both. How you convey this message to the other girls or ladies to shuffle the two responsibilities, mother and career also?
So basically, I was in a unique position. And I say this because I was not just a mother of twins at the peak of my career, I was also a single mother, you know, and my support structure, both my mother, she passed away when my children were 3 years old, and Mr. Hegde, my other, like umbrella of support, he passed away when my children were 4.5. Within 1.5 years, both, passed away. So I was left alone, grappling with my life situation, my twins, young twins, twin boys, um, in a strange city like Delhi, which was not my home. But I could not be in Bangalore because of the media pressure. We were in papers every single day wherever we went. Um, so when someone tells me, "Oh, we saw you in page 3," I said I ran away from page 1, to be in page 3, maybe. So I actually, the media pressure was intense in Bangalore. At that time, I didn't want my children to be exposed to it. So, and then the political pressure was there. So there was a lot of other kinds of pressure, social pressure. So I'm saying, with all these things, I was here in Delhi, vulnerable. And like you said, an artist is first of all vulnerable. Um, and then here I was with, single, 2 children, a career like dance, which it's very taxing, very demanding, because you have to practice every day. You have to keep up with your, dance every day, yoga, that, this. So yeah, I had a. If I look back on those years, I think I mean, what do I say? I was over busy. I was extending myself. I was just busy, busy, busy. I couldn't think of anything else. But like I said earlier, what gets you through is your focus, your willpower, your ability to, you know, to go through obstacles. There'll be several obstacles in your way. You can't say, oh, my life is a rainbow. No, it's not. There are several obstacles, and you have to have the ability and the persistence and the perseverance to go through it. And you also have to have self confidence in what you are capable of and what you have done. So, my choices were very unusual. And I realized that I had to pay for those choices, that nobody else was responsible for the choices I made. So I had to take responsibility for the choices I made and the results of those choices. And I had to live my life, in the best possible manner that I could. So, and that's all I've done.
If we talk about the education, education is the base of the every child. You have also formalized the NCRT syllabus at the early times. If we connect that NCRT dance syllabus right now, what the lacuna you feel and how things can be improved?
So basically, NCRT had a large committee, and they went about taking opinions from this very, very large committee way back in the 80s. Um, it was about incorporating, art, the dance, music, art into, schools, education, school education. And that is what we did in the 80s. But at that time, it was not curricular. It was not co-curricular. It was extracurricular. So people could choose whether to do it or not. Sport, art, these are all choices you made. And since they were extracurricular activities, there was no compulsion in learning or doing it, right? So now, fast forward to 2020 onwards, we've realized, meaning we have, as in many people like me, have realized that we have lost a generation or maybe two because of lack of education in culture, in our own culture, right? So you can learn dance and music, and you can then watch Spick performances of great artists. It's over. They're just there in some corner of your memory. How does that germinate? Whatever is in the corner of your memory, it germinates when you write about it, when you talk about it, when you have repeated experience of it, which is not the case with SMIC because sometimes they call class 5, sometimes they call class 10, sometimes they call whichever school you go to, they call the class that is free. I mean, let us admit that. Some children are exposed to it, some children want to continue to be volunteers of it. That doesn't make it the movement that it has to be or it can be. So basically, what you need is a co curricular or a curricular activity where you're graded not because of your performance, but maybe theoretical knowledge of the art forms. Okay? A kind of a knowledge of our, heritage, transference of that heritage. How does, what is the transference of it? Nobody's asking anyone to become an expert in Bharatanatyam or Kathak or Odissi. That takes years and years and years of practice, and also it also takes the person's self interest and passion to be able to succeed. But everybody in college, like school, like you're an IIT person, your wife is from IIM. Do they have even one class in a month where you're given a lecture on your intangible heritage,
No.
your cultural heritage, your state heritage? I mean, your Bharat's heritage is huge. Then every region has its own cultural heritage, cultural art forms special to that region. Do you even learn about it? No. So that is what NEP, the new education policy, aims at doing. It wants to incorporate art into schools and colleges at the school college level, so that you get credits, whatever number of credits you get. So those credits can be used as part of your other credits. Like you can get science, so okay, you get 9 in science, 10 in mathematics, maybe 8 in English. I'm taking 10 as the
Base.
yeah, as the whatever O
Hmm.
O category, grade point average. You may get 6 in art. You may get, when I say art, maybe painting, maybe dance, maybe theater, maybe skit, anything, like poetry, anything. But you should know, and then one paper on theory of your heritage. What are these art forms? Basic knowledge. What are the art forms available? What are the musical instruments available? What's the genesis of it? These are not, I mean, they're not going to interfere with your academic accomplishments. They're only going to add to it. Because I always tell people that yes, art makes you humane, art makes you compassionate, art makes you a better
Human being.
person, human being. So therefore, by being a better person, you also become a a community. In the community, the community kind of thrives. An artistic community thrives, society thrives, and therefore nations thrive. If the nation has a cultural base, then you erode that cultural base, then what do you have? Only commerce, pure commerce. So, and then you have mental health issues, you have issues because you're comparing yourself to so many people. Many people are successful, more successful than you. Of course they are, because that's the way life is. Life is not equal. Life is all about inequality. And how do you manage that inequality? That is what is most important. So what I'm trying to say is, this understanding of your inheritance culture makes you a more kind of a holistic person. You have a holistic awareness. I have gone to many IITs to talk, to dance, through their, when they invited me. And I find a lot of those children unaware of everything. They're like living in a cocoon of their own doing. Their mathematics, their calculus, they may be geniuses in engineering. But what is the conversation I'm going to have with you? Because I don't know engineering and I don't want to talk numbers. So, what is the conversation? Are we going to talk about life? Let's talk about life. Let's talk about a beautiful flower. I mean, how do you view this flower? Let's talk about that poem. What are the layers in that poetry? How do you understand that poetry? What are your viewpoints about that poetry? These are important things in life. And every child should be exposed to stories, to poetry, to dance, to music, to art forms, a visual, what they see, so that all their senses get enhanced. All your sensory perceptions get enhanced when you have art around you. I just look at something and say, oh, how beautiful that is. I mean, just like that. And that one moment, your mind is so clear because you're not thinking of anything else. You're just thinking about this beautiful art form. Oh, how lovely that is, kind of a thing. I mean, so it's important. It's very, very important for the holistic development of an individual. And that is what the new education policy is aiming at. And, just last week, I was in a meeting of vice chancellors in Mumbai University, and they were talking about, again, art and culture and youth affairs, and their competitions that they have, and how to grade the competitions and stuff like that. So I was telling them, you can grade the competitions as anything, but it becomes important if those grades are added to the overall grades of your academic performance. If they're not added, then what is the value? Person is not going to invest that kind of time and energy to want to learn it, or to practice it, or to perform it, right? And art makes you also I mean, and they said something. Oh, madam, time nahi hota. Science hai, yeah, theorems that this, mathematics and whatever. So therefore, rhythm, tal, it's all about mathematics. It's all about complex mathematics. You go, Adi Tala, we say in North Indian music, they say teen tal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Simple. Like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. So it's mathematics. And how do you add, subtract? You don't subtract, you mostly add. Yeah, you subtract because you have silent moments of silence where you then you come on the tal, you come on some, or in our art form, we come before some. Like if it's we have to end in the last. In the North Indian thing, they come on one, on one, on the sum. So the structures make you, and you're all the time calculating in your mind, rhythm. You're doing mathematics, okay? You're dancing, you're choreographing, it's geometry. How are you moving? How far are you moving? In what, geometry are you moving? What kind of geometrical movements are you making? That's choreography. Yeah. And storytelling. What are the stories you're telling? And why are you telling them? Why are these stories important? Because they are eternal human values. Eternal human values. Whether we're talking about Lord Krishna and his antics or his victories, this whole, thing about victory of good over evil, Lord Rama, Shiva, the esoteric god up there in Mount Kailas. What all has he given up to be esoteric? Look at the power of yoga, the power of his mind, the determination, grit, willpower, all that. We're learning so much. Stories of conquest, stories of, uncertainty, stories of self doubt, stories of, like overcoming so many things, so many obstacles. So if they can do it, we can do it.
Yes.
It's a simple message, right?
Yes.
I mean, so what I'm saying is these stories, sociology, they help you. And science, they say. Science, like I said, mathematics, geometry, pure science, biology, the human being. I mean, when we talk about the chakras, awakening of the chakras, it's all science, right? It's biology and science, not astrology, astronomy, something so esoteric that we don't understand. No, you understand. You practice yoga, you're in control of your mind, you're in control of your body, you know how to, face difficulties in life. You don't just collapse and commit suicide or something. That's that happens when you have mental health problems, when you don't have a perception of so many beautiful things around you. It's beautiful to be alive. It's beautiful to be doing things. And you can't be perfect in everything, right? So if something is not meant for you, it is not meant for you. You go the other way.
Yes. Yes.
And these understandings come with art. They don't come with pure academic kind of science, getting 99.99999 No.
Right now, you said that every child should learn art. If someone is serious and he want to learn dance from you, how can he connect to you?
Well, I mean, you can email me. A lot of people email me. A lot of people have find my telephone number. They call me, and I tell them I'm strict because I don't have a dance class. Like I don't teach 10, 15 people at the same time, and on every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday I'm sitting and doing taya tai taya tai tayum datta. No, I don't do that. My time is precious, and I give a lot when I give. The student should be able to absorb a lot from me. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. I'm not into one of those things saying, oh, I have 50 students, I have 100 students. Out of these 100 students or 50 students, if one student becomes a dancer, then my life is worth it. No. I think, why am I wasting my time on 49 others or 99 others? It's not my business to do it. There are lots and lots of dance schools. You can go and learn. You want to learn from Pratibha Prahlad, you have to learn the value of art, the value of Bharat's heritage, the value of our intangible heritage, and how it can make you a better human being, a better person, and of course, a better artist. Of course. Because, see, all of us aim at perfection, but we do understand that perfection belongs to the realm of God. It doesn't belong in the realm of, human beings. But so, therefore, you say near perfect, near perfect. For me, getting near perfect, doing the best you possibly can, and understanding the aesthetic codes, the aesthetic values is very, very, very important. Than merely going like robotic and saying tayya, tay, tayyum, that, tayya. It's not interesting for me to teach like that. I want to teach a person. So I have given my art to many people who have been able to absorb it. So now one on one I teach sometimes, maybe two maximum I teach. But when I do choreographic work, it's a lot more people. It's a lot more people. But like I said, they have to value my time, value the fact that it's not just another dance class. अरे हरे हमारी बेटी को हमें डांस क्लास में छोड़ना है तो आपकी डांस क्लास में छोड़ दे. No, 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 sorry. मुझे मेरे पास ऐसे डांस क्लास नहीं है. That goes on through the rigors of the initial things. Yes, but if you want to be a serious dancer, if you want to be an intelligent dancer, if you want to be a thinking dancer, and if you want to learn things that you probably will not get from somebody else, then you can come to me and I'll be happy to teach.
घुंघरू की खनक में एक क्रांति छिपी है, मंच पर उठे हर एक कदम में एक कहानी बसी है। नृत्यम लोकहितम साधनम, अर्थात नृत्य लोकहित का साधन है। तो ये थी एक कहानी एक ऐसी कलाकार की जिसने मंच पर केवल नृत्य नहीं किया बल्कि सोच, समाज और सत्ता को एक आईना दिखाया है, जिनकी कला ने अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंचों पर भारत की पहचान को और गहरा किया। उन्होंने स्त्रियों, कलाकारों और समाज को हाशिए पर खड़े लोगों के लिए एक आवाज बुलंद की। प्रतिभा मैम ने हमें ये सिखाया कि कला सिर्फ एक सौंदर्य की वस्तु नहीं बल्कि समाज को बदलने का एक औजार भी है। अगली बार एक और किस्से के साथ लौटेंगे। तब तक कला से जुड़े रहिए, सवाल कीजिए और अपनी सोच को बुलंद कीजिए। थैंक यू सो मच मैम हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए।